Much like E3 2009, 2010's conference was a wild ride. This was a very turbulent time for video games. I remember watching this and worrying about whether or not video games would still be fun in the future. The three major themes of this E3 were gimmicky motion crap, multimedia stuff, and 3D. We saw game consoles turn into Netflix boxes, and we saw controllers turn into very easy jokes for middle schoolers. We got some classic misleading advertising, and on top of that, we also got some video games. This year there is no E3, so that's a little disappointing. For all their cringe and filler and awkwardness, I still would rather have E3 than not. But I got the next best thing. Some good old-fashioned nostalgia googles. I got a lot of nostalgia for E3 2010 because of how much more innocent the industry seemed back then. Anybody who follows gaming news right now knows that it's an absolute dumpster fire when executives aren't busy underpaying their staff or harvesting their organs without their consent. Developers are usually putting out some aggressively mediocre products. Not only does pessimism pervade every corner of the gaming community right now, but it has for the last 5 years. But today, I just want to take you back to the past to watch the shitty E3 conference that sucks ass. So grab some chips because we're just here for fun today. Konami, everybody. Konami's E3 is kinda like a Stanley Kubrick film where it's so mysterious and haunting and you never fully understand what's happening or why, but every time you watch it you discover another detail that you missed before. Really, it's a cinematic masterpiece that can never be fully understood. It's like The Shining, or Silent Hills, which Konami cancelled, so... Ubisoft kicked off 2010 with some fancy Kinect crap. Ubisoft went all in on the Kinect, which took up an annoyingly disproportionate amount of this entire E3. Then they showed off some Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Now keep in mind, this is back when Assassin's Creed was actually somewhat good and wasn't just a mediocre hack and slash RPG thing that was spit out of an algorithmic assembly line. I talk a lot of shit about Assassino Credo, but I honestly really enjoyed Brotherhood, which should tell you something. Sean White Gayboard Man showed up with some Kinect crap. This lasted for about 12 straight minutes. This presentation was basically taking a small handful of games and stretching them way out over a lengthy duration, which poetically is the same approach they have to game design. Then some crazy people show up with laser guns and start shooting each other while the commentator tries to awkwardly quip about it.
Wow. It's attractive people fighting each other with... Come on, hurry up. Yeah, you played a death match with your kid.
Yeah.
Harmless death match.
They love it.
Thanks to your mustache from the movie Maverick.
You know, this is really why I watch E3. It just wouldn't be complete without a bunch of jokes that don't work and make me feel secondhand embarrassment for everyone involved. They showed this weird pulse sensor thing. This showcase was basically all about gimmicks with maybe 3 games that actually mattered. This is what concerned me about this presentation. There was way too much focus on weird innovations in technologies while I'm just sitting here going,
where the video games?
Rabbids showed up with Rabbids in Time, which has like a 62 on Metacritic, which is way too generous if you ask me. Then they showed off Ghost Recon. Finally, an actual video game. You have guns, and explosions, and snipers. You got sprinting and stealth camo. Confirmed. It's a video game. Driver San Francisco is a game I've never heard of, so it's probably really good. Project Dust was the working title of From Dust, which Wikipedia describes as a god video game. Yeah. You know how we got Strand-type games? This was the first God-type game. Then they made a power move. They said, what if we show off a good game? I love Rayman. Ever since I was a kid, I loved Rayman, and it was really cool to see him liberated from the annoying clutches of the Rabbids. But I gotta be honest though, I have never actually beaten Rayman Origins, but maybe one day I'll get around to it. You know, after I dig up my Uplay credentials. They closed this presentation out with Michael Jackson, The Experience. You know it's a bad presentation when a game like that is your big reveal. Thankfully, Ubisoft would never have a bad presentation again, and Rayman would continue to go strong far into the future. EA showed off a car game, Phantom Bino ignored it, Dead Space 2 had a very cool cinematic trailer. I don't know how accurate this is to the final game, but it looks badass. If I had to guess, the game has roughly 12 graphics, which was actually a lot back then. Then they showed off some Medal of Honor. If you've never heard of Medal of Honor and you're wondering what it is, well, this is going to blow your mind. It's a new and exciting game called FPS. Yeah. But that's not all. It's a military FPS, where you play as a military guy. Yeah, exciting stuff. I think this was the first game to do that, but it might have also been Battlefield Bad Company 2 expansion pack coming winter 2010. Then they showed some sports stuff, so I took that opportunity to check on the roast beef that I had in the oven. While I was marinating the roast, they started talking about Kinect again, so I basically missed nothing. Sims 3, I've never really cared about these games, but they pop up in my consciousness every now and again. The last mainline Sims game that came out, I think, was Sims 4, which, if I remember right, was completely broken at launch, so I imagine Sims 3 is at least a little better than that. Crysis 2 had really good graphics. They showed off the 3D a little bit, which was a big theme of 2010. Bitch Bablinski showed off Bulletstorm. You might remember him as the developer of Lawbreakers, although realistically you probably don't.
I think we've kind of made the Dark Souls of competitive first-person shooters.
Old Republic was there. This is back when BioWare was a respectable studio and wasn't most known for whatever this is. Activision was there too. I can't find the entire presentation, but apparently Eminem was there, and I imagine he said something like, "It's hell to be shady. Yesterday I saw someone playing Nintendo and I called him a gay baby. Then I went outside and punched an Xbox lady and got thrown off a cliff by Tom Brady." Yeah, he kinda fell off. Microsoft kicked this E3 off by showing off Call of Duty Black Ops. It's super nostalgic to see Black Ops without a number next to it. I remember when this came out, it was the only thing anybody was talking about. Back then, Call of Duty was still a name of renown and respect. It wasn't like today where you take a shot every time they announce a new one and die of hepatitis. It was some real ass shit. I like how he's just playing the game without really talking over it. Then he just dips. It's like they thought, bitch, it's Call of Duty. I don't gotta explain nothing. Let the game speak for itself. I respect that confidence. And these graphics were just phenomenal, dude. As a Nintendo dork back then, I could not believe how realistic these games looked. Looking at it today, yeah, it's a bit jaggy, but we're not in 2022 right now. We're in 2010. They introduced Kojima so he could introduce the guy who makes Metal Gear Rising, so he could introduce Metal Gear Rising, which introduced Raiden, which introduced a sword, which introduced a bunch of... I don't know where I'm going with this. In the context of the Kinect, Metal Gear Rising seems like a very intuitive choice, which is funny because I don't think it actually had Kinect support. Phil Spencer shows up, who is almost unrecognizable from the man we see today. I guess he spent way too much time playing Xbox all day. Cliff Bleszinski talked about Gears of War, which is another series that was respectable back then. Fable 3 looks like one of the few things Peter Molyneux showed off that actually lived up to expectations. Codename Kingdoms would eventually become Rise, Son of Rome. Then finally they busted out Halo Reach. This was probably the highlight of the presentation for a lot of people. They didn't show off a ridiculous quantity of games, but the ones they did show at least seemed like games that matter. You know, at least up until this point. Sadly, it's all downhill after Halo. The remaining hour of this event was just showing off all the stuff that the Kinect could do. 67% of this event was just Kinect shovelware, and honestly, they could have called this the Kinect press conference and nobody would argue with you. The funniest part by far is when this dude uses the Kinect to pull up Zune. Yeah, Zune. Will there ever be anything more funny than Microsoft showing off their stupid Kinect by using it to pull up their stupid music service that most people watching this video didn't even know existed?
Where the video games?
The presentation devolves into an endless assembly line of crap that nobody cares about. Whether it's, oh, you can use the Kinect to watch movies and TV, the thing that you could already do, or some shovelware garbage that nobody remembers. These things are treated as though they are on par with things like Halo. I feel like I remember maybe one person back then who had a Kinect and they couldn't even use it because it required too much room. You can't be jumping and moving around and flailing your arms if your entertainment room is relatively compact. Like, could you imagine using this thing in a dumpy ass downtown apartment? It ain't happening, man. To me, that's the thing I hate the most about Kinect. It ended up being like this thing that was intended to solve problems that didn't need to be solved because they weren't really problems. But, to sweeten the deal, they also released a new model of Xbox 360 that didn't get the red ring of death. So, la-di-fucking-da, Microsoft, you did the bare minimum. Some things never change. The only thing more embarrassing than the Kinect is the PlayStation Move, and that took up a big chunk of Sony's presentation. From my perspective, this was a bit of an uncertain time for the gaming medium. It really seemed like the big boys wanted this motion crap to be the future of gaming. Jack Tretton shows up and starts talking, and he kinda just doesn't stop.
Suggested how cool it would be if maybe Kevin Butler co-hosted with me, and I gotta be honest with you, definitely considered it for a minute, but...
Where the video games?
Much like in 2009, there was just way too much focus on business talk. Then he says the PS3 was the only console with built-in Wi-Fi, which is a lie. Like, literally just a straight-up lie. I know they're trying to sell stuff, but that was just legitimately false. Unless built-in Wi-Fi means something else that I don't understand, I'm pretty sure the Wii had built-in Wi-Fi. What type of bullshit were they trying to pull here? You guys remember 3D TVs? You know, those special TVs that came with fancy glasses? They said it was going to be the future of gaming and shit, and then 3 people bought them because they cost $7 trillion each. Sony was leading the way in bringing 3D gaming into the mainstream, and they crashed their car almost instantly.
A decade from now, when we look back at this year, 2010, it will most likely be remembered as the year that PlayStation brought authentic 3D to the industry.
Nope. Killzone was kinda like Sony's answer to Halo. Of course, of those two series, only one of them still gets talked about today, and the other one is Killzone. They used Killzone 3 to show off the 3D technology, except you would only be able to see it if you were in the audience. 3D is something you can only really understand if you see it with your own eyes, so you can't really sell the technology to anyone who's not right there watching. Unless you're Nintendo. Heroes on the Move would eventually become PlayStation Move Heroes. You have 6 PlayStation mascots and they all work together to fight through 50 levels. Today, you might hear PlayStation mascots and think of Nathan Drake, Kratos, Aloy, Joel, Ellie, Abby, and the funky clicker who can rap or something. I'm pretty sure that was a character. Ask Neil Druckmann, he'd be happy to tell you. But that's not what PlayStation mascots meant back then. Sly Cooper, Bentley, Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Wanker, that is a PlayStation mascot. As for the game itself though, apparently it's not very good, so yeah, that's pretty anticlimactic. Then they started talking about a brand partnership with Coca-Cola.
Where the video games?
That's when Kevin Butler shows up. I remember seeing this guy's PS3 ads on TV at the time. This dude is sometimes credited as being one of the things that turned the tide for the PS3. In case you don't remember, the PS3 ads before Kevin Butler had a very, distinct flavor. As an adult, I've come to appreciate Kevin Butler a lot more. The shit he talked back then that made me mad in 2010 is the same stuff that makes me like him now. He's not perfect, he can be a little corny, but there's an undertone of understanding of his audience. Or at least he's very good at pretending. That being said, for all his big talk about how much he loves video games,
Where the video games?
Thankfully, my man Marcus showed up to talk about the PSP, and I think he put it best when he said,
"We got good kids playing bad games."
A quote for the ages, and sadly still relevant. They showed a guy who lost his job because he was playing too much Peace Walker, which, you know, that's valid. I like that game too. They took some shots at phone gaming, which aged very well. They also announced Season 2 of The Tester. If you don't know what that is, it's a fake-ass reality show where a bunch of wise guys compete for the opportunity to become a developer on a PlayStation game. Yeah, that's right. It's a game show where the prize is working a job. Fuck you, Sony. They talked about Little Bitch Planet 2, and then they started talking about PSN.
The service that the competition charges $50 for, PS3 users get absolutely free. And that's not going to change.
Hey Jack, it's me, Phantom Bino. I'm from 12 years in the future, and you just fucking lied. Jack keeps talking for 3 years, Phantom Beano falls asleep, then they show some Medal of Honor stuff and Dead Space 2 again. Then they made a power play by busting out the big man Gabe. For a bit of historical context, Gabe talked some mad shit about home game consoles before this presentation, so he started by apologizing for that. Then he showed off Portal 2 for the first time, with some PS3 exclusive features. Nothing gets me nostalgic like Valve announcing an actual video game. Final Fantasy, Mafia 2, then they had Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Gran Turismo was another game about driving cars, so if that's what you're into, no judgment, but I don't really care. Then they showed off Infamous 2, another PlayStation mascot that nobody talks about anymore. I think I played this game for like 3 hours and said, yeah, that's cool, and then I never played it again. Then two cabbies in New York have a very realistic conversation about death racing games on the PS3, which, as everyone who's been to New York knows, is all they ever talk about. That's right, boyos, it's Twisted Metal. We got my man David Jaffe up here to lecture everyone on Bush League game design. Overall, this presentation had way too much talking, but at least there were more actual video games than the Xbox presentation, so I'm gonna have to hand it to him for that. In general, video game shows should have as many video games as possible, at least I think. Maybe that's controversial, I don't know. Alright, that's enough playing around. Let's bring out the big guns. Nintendo. This is all that matters. No business fugazi, no stupid ass motion gimmicks, no... Oh, wait. Nintendo wasted no time at all. Right out the gate, bam, Zelda Skyward Sword. Miyamoto busts out a sword and shield and kills everyone in the audience. Bill tries to play the game, but things go awry when he turns out to be really bad at it. That's when Miyamoto shows up to show him how it's done, and as it turns out, he's also very bad at it. When they were showing Skyward Sword off, I gotta be honest, I wasn't really a fan. All I could see was the motion controls, and I did not like that very much at all. It's still a bucket list game though, I still haven't beat it, one day I will. But they spent almost 20 minutes on it, which, like, yeah, I know it's Zelda, but come on, man. Reggie shows off Mario Sports Mix for the Wii. This is another one I never got to play, but based on what I've read, it's pretty mediocre, so I don't feel too bad about that. Reggie started talking about how many Wiis and Mario Karts they sold.
Where the video game?
Then they showed off a crappy Mario Party knockoff with Mii's. Now, this is probably just a coincidence, but it was around this time that I started not liking Nintendo as much. They showed off Just Dance 2 for Wii. Just Dance ended up being the swan song for the Wii, with Just Dance 2020 being released for the Wii as late as 2019. Only Ubisoft would put a game on the Wii in 2019. And then in classic Nintendo fashion, they announced an RPG that isn't Mother 3. Then they busted out that stupid GoldenEye remake.
Who here would say that it's one of the greatest shooters of all time?
Everybody.
Signed by somebody who never played the Control Center mission. In my opinion, saying GoldenEye is one of the greatest shooters of all time is a little bit lolsy. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's very good and I like it, but even as early as 2010, I feel like there were just way better shooters out there. Of course, the GoldenEye remake itself is just a knockoff of Call of Duty with James Bond models pasted over top of it, so that's how that went. Disney's Epic Mickey is a weird, artsy kind of game. I think I own it. I probably played it once in my life. The art direction is really nice and definitely a testament to the fact that even on a crappy Wii, you can still make a game look very pretty. Speaking of games that I played once and have really nice art direction and look really pretty and have the word epic in the title for some reason, Kirby's Epic Yarn. This is another one for the bucket list. Metroid Other M is another game I started but never beat. From what I remember, the gameplay was alright, but from the standpoint of narrative and story, I feel like it tried to do way too many things and none of them really paid off. I don't think it was a fundamentally bad idea, but perhaps the delivery could have been tweaked a little bit. Maybe it gets really good and knocks me on my ass at the end. I don't know, but maybe I'll finish it one day. Then bam! Donkey Kong Country, baby. You guys remember Donkey Kong, right? The guy who made Nintendo what it is today? that they haven't made a new game for since Tropical Freeze? Then they dropped the bomb, Nintendo 3DS. This was the big announcement for me. I got this thing on launch date because of this E3. Remember, 3D was one of the big things this generation, even outside of video gaming. James Cameron's Avatar became the single biggest moneymaker in cinematic history, purely because of the 3D. Nintendo made a power play with the 3DS, glasses-free 3D that you could take anywhere on the go. That was a huge leap forward in technology. Despite that, me and most people I know almost never really used the 3D feature on the 3DS. Really, the thing that made the 3DS cool was just that it was a much more powerful version of the DS and could play much more technically impressive video games like Kid Icarus, for instance. This presentation started out kinda bad, but very quickly picked up steam. I feel like almost everyone in the Nintendo fandom got what they wanted with this show. You got a Zelda, a Donkey Kong, a Kirby, a Metroid, and they even had a relatively niche JRPG for good measure. This was probably the best presentation out of all of them. 2010's E3 was a time of curiosity and uncertainty. With an increased focus on 3D and motion gimmicks, I was afraid that it was going to change for the worse, and that developers would lose focus as they started trying to desperately integrate all kinds of unnecessary nonsense that didn't help anybody. But looking back at it from the future, it's more like an interesting piece of history, especially now that I know it has a happy ending. Today, motion gimmicks and 3D are no longer a priority, even though they made it seem like they were here to stay, and I'm so glad it worked out that way. The war is over, and I won. As usual. Thanks for watching, everybody.